You're asking about the situation of women, and this is pretty much what we are experiencing.
Dear friends, welcome at Forum 2000 online chat. My name is Irena Kalhousova, and I am happy to introduce to our next episode Glanis Changachirere, who is a founder and director of Institute for Young Women Development. Glanis is also a founding coordinator of the African Women Leaders Forum. She's a recipient of the 30 Under 30 Democracy Award from the National Endowment for Democracy for her pioneering work on young women's political participation in Zimbabwe. Welcome, Glanis, in our show.
I'm pleased to be here, and thank you for having me, Irena. The situation in Zimbabwe is what you'd call the more things change, the more they remain the same. As you have correctly put it across, Robert Mugabe's governance was characterized by human rights violations, censorship to civil society leaders, to human rights activists, to political activists, persecution, and unfortunately, in the new dispensation where we have he has continued with the system that they created together with his predecessor. Things have not changed as much from what we've been seeing in the past. I'm sure you have been following, a situation where when we had our election in 2018, the election that was actually used to sanitize the coup that took place in 2017, there was a contestation between the opposition and Idi Mnangagwa's ruling party around the winning president, and the violations that followed. The demonstrations by the oppositions were quite unprecedented, where we actually had soldiers get into the streets and crush the demonstrators, leading to 6 people being killed. And that is sort of like continued, because again in 2018 19, when the economic situation continued to deteriorate, activists and civil society took to the streets, and again that was responded by another very heavy response from the state, where again the army was unleashed. And we had a very terrible situation where we recorded incidences of sexual violence against women by the military. We also had other people who suffered from gunshots by the same. And this situation is sort of like continued. And as I'm speaking to you right now, sadly, we are in a national lockdown because of the COVID-19 pandemic. And just a week ago, the opposition took to the streets to protest against, the inadequate measures put by the government to protect people, to ensure that people's livelihoods are protected, and people can continue to have access to food and basic human rights during this lockdown. And that was again responded in a very disproportionate way, where 3 young women leaders in the opposition movement were abducted, sexually violated. And I mean, sadly, the government continues to refuse and want to turn a blind eye to this reality. So the situation has not pretty much changed from what it was during Robert Mugabe's time, but I could say that ED has actually continued to rule in the best way that the ruling party, ZANU-PF, knows best, just to continue with that system of oppression and repression to dissenting voices.
So are there some new issues which you as a civil society, being a representative of a society, have to deal with under the new government, or also for you it's more or less the same as under Robert Mugabe?
I mean, it's remained pretty much the same. You know, our everyday work is about fighting and defending for human rights, and calling this government to really respect the rights of citizens. You know, we have got a new constitution that was adopted in 2013. And our focus has really been to try and encourage this government to uphold constitutionalism according to that new supreme law. And it seems like we are not getting the results that we want, because every day we are actually having to remind them that this constitution exists, that Zimbabwean citizens have got constitutional rights, and you need to uphold those rights. And they continuously violate those rights. So our work has pretty much remained the same, where we are every day fighting for these human rights. They have not even been able to, you know, meet the basic human rights, such as food, such as shelter. People continue to suffer, you know, where they are doing demolitions to properties that they condemning, but without necessarily providing alternative options to these citizens. Even during this lockdown, as I'm speaking to you again, they have demolished market stalls for informal traders, but without providing alternative places where these people can actually do their business, despite the fact that the current Zimbabwean economy is actually sustained by these informal traders. I mean, the political space has continued to shrink, with opposition and also civil society and activists not being able to demonstrate. They've banned demonstrations. If somebody demonstrates, they get arrested, but these are constitutional rights that we have. And these are exactly the same things that we were fighting for during Mugabe's time, where we're calling up for the opening up of democratic space and upholding citizens' rights. So we have really continued on the same trajectory as what we have seen in the past 30 years.
You are a founder of Institute for Young Women Development. So, of course, gender empowerment is one of your key topics and agendas. And I would like to ask you, how do you think the national lockdown you mentioned and the whole situation which is happening and is related to COVID-19 pandemic will somehow set women back in Zimbabwe? Because we know that it's actually women jobs which are the most threatened, and of course that women are those who are taking care mostly for children at home under the lockdown. So, you know, what's the situation in Zimbabwe? What's going on when it comes to women?
It's a very sad situation where women are suffering at all levels across the board. And I would say this national lockdown, or rather COVID-19 in general, has actually deepened the inequalities that exist in Zimbabwean society. And unfortunately, as that happens, the women are pushed to the extreme end and suffer the most. Women were already suffering pre-COVID-19, but the situation has actually deteriorated further. You know, when we went into a national lockdown, it meant that all the women were now fully and totally responsible for the nation and also for their own families, with everybody being at home. And in an economy where we are sustained by an informal sector, most of the women were actually the breadwinners in their homes, you know, doing small scale activities to be able to take care of their families. You know, they would do cross-border trading, buying and selling. They spend their days in the market selling produce from their farms. And now they are not able to go to those markets, and at the same time they still have to face their families and be able to provide something at least. You know, in an economy where the generality of the population actually lack formal jobs. That also means that there's not even security for their husbands who may have been working elsewhere. And this is the livelihood situation has become their day-to-day struggle. And secondly, because they're having to spend as much time in their home, we've seen incidences of violence, escalating. And this has been continuously rising throughout from the beginning of the lockdown up to where we are today. And we are still anticipating that it will continue to rise. Even the state violence that we are talking about, you realize it also targeted women. And this is a reflection of how women are continuously being put at the center of this crisis in terms of violations, and they're actually becoming the tool left, right, and center for people to express their anger, to express their frustrations with the current government, and again for the government to use those women as the tools to demonstrate to the opposition that if you continue to want to represent the people's voice, this is what we'll do to you, being humiliated through the women in their party. So the situation has continued to deteriorate, and it's really sad that the government is doing very little to provide safety nets to families so that that can also alleviate, the violence that women are experiencing. And even with the police, they are overwhelmed. They are not able to respond to these increasing cases of violence. So it's a sad situation that we're faced with here, and it really requires for a lot to be done, both by civil society and especially the government, in trying to ensure that they provide safety nets to families and ensuring that they also do the best that they can to make sure that the perpetrators of the violence are brought to account.
And may I ask you a little bit more general question about how your work and the work of your organization is perceived among women in Zimbabwe? To what extent you are actually facing criticism and maybe even opposition from women who would like to keep the situation as it has been for centuries, or who actually appreciate the fact that you are fighting for their rights and that you want to change the status quo and to empower them?
I would say that in as much as we are doing work that is quite meaningful in transforming the lives of women and their families, there is still this perception that women's rights work is work that is anti-man. We're perceived to be fighting the men, and everything that we are doing, quote unquote, it's referred to as home wrecking kind of work. And yet for the women that we actually work with, we are seeing the transformation, and they're giving testimonies of how this work is enabling them to actually step up, stand out, stand for themselves, and really represent their wishes and desires by being there for their families, going out and participating in the public arena, influencing processes in their communities, and how everything is organized and how everything is led. And that in itself to the man is actually threatening, and there seems to be backlash around this kind of transformation that the women are witnessing. And in some quarters, the more women are educated around their violence, around their human rights, the more they are actually coming out to speak out and condemn the violence. But then that is received with a negative perception, where it's then being said that you are actually being taught to be violent, and you're rebelling against your families, and that's why you are wanting to go and report these cases to the police. But however, in some quarters, there are actually men and institutions that are receiving this work in a progressive way, and in a positive way, that they're actually also trying to contribute towards the advancement of women's rights. Like in our case, we work with traditional leaders, and one of our areas of focus is to tackle challenges that are experienced, calling for those systems to actually use a rights-based approach.
I don't want to take it.
Sorry about this.
Don't worry about it.
Let me just. Sorry about that. Okay, I was talking about. You had asked about
cooperation with traditional leaders. It was interesting how you promote your agenda through those who are the somehow the bearers of the traditional society.
You're asking about the situation of women, and this is pretty much what we are experiencing.
Is he okay?
Yeah, I think we are good now. Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, so you were talking about the cooperation with traditional leaders and their acceptance or perception of your work.
Yeah, so one of our focus areas is to advocate for a rights-based approach in traditional courts, which are quite predominant in rural areas. And we've been working with traditional leaders and asking them to consider, adopting constitutional rights that are provided in the Constitution when they're giving judgments in their courts. And we proposed that for them to be able to do that, they actually needed to make sure that they also have women represented in the traditional courts. So in the beginning, I'm sorry once again. It's playing.
Yes, so women and courts.
Yes. So our work has been around encouraging young women participation in the traditional courts, and also encouraging the courts to use a rights-based approach when dealing with, cases especially involving women. And we trained the chiefs on the Constitution of Zimbabwe and advocated that they consider having young women in their traditional courts playing paralegal roles, which they agreed to. And I'm excited that this year, some of the traditional leaders actually came out and said, look, we are happy with the advice and constructive criticism that we're getting from the women who are playing paralegal roles in our courts. And now we want to appoint them as substantive traditional court officers. So that shows that while there are some sectors of the society who are seeing our work in a negative way, some are actually reforming, including institutions that are traditionally highly patriarchal. And this in itself is what has been motivating us to continue doing this work, despite some of the challenges that we're experiencing, where we are facing backlash from the government and also even from other individual people in the communities.
Glanis, thank you very much. We are unfortunately running out of time, so I can't continue asking questions, even though I have so many questions on my list. But thank you very much for being with us. Thank you very much for sharing your ideas with us. And of course, I wish you best of luck with your important work. Thank you very much.